Well, good morning, everyone. We unfortunately, it looks like 10 more days of not much for rain, which now brings up the thought of doing some preventive planning on dryland acres because of it being too dry to seed. So I'm going to walk you through the rules on this. It's very important we document things correctly if we're going to try and make these claims fly. Um, Preventive planning due to droughts rare and has strict rules. You must follow all these requirements. And the first one would be that we have to have insufficient soil moisture on the final planting date. So for peas, that's coming up pretty quickly, May 15th. So if we get to that point and you were planning on seeding peas, and it's still this dry, then yep, that's after that date we can start turning these PP claims in. As we get to the final side, I'm going to review all these other final plant dates, but like wheat and barley wouldn't be till May 31st, so we'd have to get all the way till then without a significant rainfall event for this to fly. So that's the first trigger. I must be in a D2 or worse drought on the drought map, which pretty much the entire Golden Triangle area applies to that, at least. So make sure you're in the right drought map area. And then other producers in your area were similarly affected. So that's the other thing. This can't be a, hey, my farm, I worked the ground 10 times and I'm dried out so much I can't seed, even though the rest of my neighbor's good. So it has to be an area-wide effect thing, which we obviously check most of these boxes, right? The next thing is we need verifiable weather documentation. The records must come from sources whose business is recording weather conditions. So those Mattis weather stations in your area, rainfall records, drought monitor maps, extension reports, soil moisture records, and planting condition reports are all things that we could reference for part of this claim to make this fly. And then the other thing is the acres must be eligible for PP. So if you were normally a half and half crop fallow guy, and this was the first year you planned to seed some recrop peas or something, that's not going to fly for this. But if you're a guy that did a lot of recropping and now you're cutting back acres, you're going to fallow some acres or maybe seed those to cover crop after the late plant period or something because it is so incredibly dry. That's where this would fit. So you have to have a history of growing at least enough acres to cover what you've already seeded plus what you were planning to seed, and that gap is where we would qualify for PP here, if that makes sense. It has to be planned to be seeded to an insurable crop and not prevented by a management decision. In other words, you didn't do something with equipment or something that caused this to happen. So, and then we also need to include seed and input receipts or have seed measured in the bin to prove you had seed on hand and we're ready to go seed that and now you're not. Maps that you use to plan your seeding out this spring, if you have that and it can show we were planning to seed those fields, that kind of stuff would really help as well. Common reasons these claims are denied. So neighbors planted under similar conditions, so everybody else in your area seeded the normal number of acres that would be seeded there and you just didn't. So that one's going to be harder to make fly. There's still adequate subsoil moisture, so you might dig down below that top 2 or 3 inches and there's a fair amount of moisture down there that can hamper these claims. And then the producer just chose not to risk planting even though there was enough moisture possibly to get germination started. And then if your acreage normally stays fallow, so like I said, if this was stuff that was going to go into fallow anyways, then certainly this is not a fit for this type of claim. So documents to gather, photos and videos, stuff like that. If you have proof that the dirt was blowing after you seeded and you just had to quit because of that as well, that would help. Soil moisture data, so your agronomist or your extension agent have them come out, dig in those fields, probe in those fields, make sure it's insufficient soil moisture. Obviously rainfall logs. Most of us have, I know on our farm, we've got a 1/4 inch of rain that's been measured in our gauge since January, so that one's a no-brainer. And then rainfall logs also from like the Mattis or disinterested third parties will be very helpful here. Drought maps, agronomist recommendations, seeding plans, so prove that you actually intended to seed that, receipts for seeds or inputs that you bought for that ground, and then notes showing your inability to plant. And when in doubt, document, document, document. We can't over-document these. That's what's going to hang these claims up, is if we're going to turn the claim in once you get into the late plant period for the crop, you're going to need to get all your documentation and everything turned in before we get to the final plant date, which oftentimes is 25 days after the late plant period starts here. So anyways, we got a short window in here to kind of get this all wrapped up. So, and of course, talk to your insurance agent if you have any questions. The last thing I was going to cover was the latest seeding dates here. So, like I said, wheat and barley, we'd have to get to May 31st and have it still be this dry for these claims to fly. Certainly the next 10 days doesn't look good, so it's very possible this could happen on that. Like I said, we're already into the late plant periods for canola and smooth peas. So that's May 15th. We're not quite into it, but we're getting there. So by Friday, we could give up on trying to seed the peas if you wanted to, and that's when we would start this prevent plant process. Chickpeas May 20th, and then flax isn't all the way out till June 10th. So if you're going to PP flax, we'd have to wait all the way to June 10th and not have a big rain event. Other than that, I just wanted to cover this in a short video for you guys so that you could kind of get the general gist of what's happening here. And if you have any questions, as always, please give us a call. If this seems like it's going to fit your operation, please call us so we can kind of get the ball rolling on you getting documentation. Maybe you can get an agronomist or an extension agent out there to write up a report on these fields that you plan not to seed to support this. So thanks, guys, and hopefully it rains and we can maybe not have to think about this, but considering what it looks like now, I think we better start planning ahead.